Izanagi and Izanami are two of the most broken yet convoluted jutsus in the entirety of Naruto, and this isn't purely based on the explanation provided in the manga, but also instances where they could have been used but they weren't, such as the Uchiha clan massacre, Obito's death at the hands of Kaguya, and even Sasuke losing his Rinnegan. These are instances where multiple characters could have rewritten reality to suit their desires, but they didn't. Why is that? Well, before we address the why, let's address the what, as in what is Izanagi and Izanami.
A jutsu that can make fantasy into reality. That is the Izanagi.
Now, to put it simply, Izanagi is a genjutsu ability of the Sharingan which allows one to shape reality, while Izanami forces one to accept reality for what it is. The names of these abilities, and also the functions of them to some extent, were influenced by the sibling creator gods in Japanese mythology known as Izanagi and Izanami. They were said to have created the lesser entities such as Amaterasu, Tsukiyomi, and Susanoo, which should sound familiar since these are names of abilities derived from the Sharingan. This would also make perfect sense since these abilities are considered to be the highest and most supreme abilities of the Sharingan as well, in the same way that Izanami and Izanagi rank above the other gods in Japanese mythology. It also lends to the ability of Izanagi as well, which stems from Hagoromo's ability called Creation of All Things. This allowed him to turn fantasy into a reality, through the combination of Yin Chakra, which allowed him to create physical forms from nothingness, and Yang Chakra, which then allowed him to breathe life into those resulting creations. A prime example of this would be the Tail Beasts that were created using Creation of All Things, along with the Chakra of the Ten Tails. So the Uchiha created Izanagi using this ability as its basis, but it also had certain limitations, such as the fact that Izanagi could only be used for a few seconds and the eye that was used to perform the ability would then go blind. This was shown in the backstory explained by Itachi after his fight with Kabuto. The Uchiha were able to control reality by changing it to the outcome they deemed preferable. And this is why I said the ability is broken. Let's say an Uchiha was to get severely injured in battle. They can simply reject this reality by turning their bodies into an illusion, then project their consciousness elsewhere and create a new body for that consciousness. That is why I'm reluctant to even call this genjutsu, which is by definition an illusion created by manipulating the senses. Izanagi isn't an illusion. What you're seeing was and is 100% real. The body that was severely damaged wasn't an illusion, it was there and part of that reality. Then it was subsequently erased from existence and a new body was created. This even goes way beyond that as seen in the very same episode. Izanagi wasn't just able to rewrite reality's effect on the user's body, but also on the bodies of his comrades. Yes, this one Uchiha was able to revive multiple Uchiha with a single usage of Izanagi, which has serious implications that I'm going to explain in a bit. Now just to clarify, Izanagi isn't just a one-time usage where it changes one thing and then that's it. The effect of the ability actually runs for a few seconds, so one can change reality and continue resurrecting for the duration the ability is active, which as I mentioned before was a few seconds. Though there was the case of Danzo that was able to use the ability for a minute at a time per eye. So for 1 minute Danzo was in complete control of reality. This allowed him to survive many lethal blows from Sasuke by creating a new body over and over again using the many Sharingans he had attached to his right arm. By the way, the Uchiha inherited this ability because they're genetic descendants of Hagoromo through his eldest son named Indra. And Indra specifically inherited Hagoromo's visual prowess, thus his bloodline possessing the ability to use a variant of Creation of All Things, that being Izanagi, while Ashura's bloodline wasn't. Note that it is a tad bit convoluted when it comes to who first awakened the Sharingan, as it is implied in the manga that this person was Indra, the son of Hagoromo, while in the anime they changed it to Hagoromo himself, who then went on to awaken the Rinnegan. Though that's not really of consequence when it comes to this topic since Izanagi would still stem from a diluted version of the Sharingan, thus the limitations placed on the ability. Danzo was able to somewhat circumvent the time limitation by being able to use it for longer since he had Hashirama cells. The same can be said for Obito that used Izanagi to survive Konan's exploding bombs. He said he could use it for even longer than Danzo, and that's likely because over half his body was made up of Hashirama cells. So one can assume that the more Hashirama cells one possesses, the longer they can use Izanagi. This could be because Hashirama is a descendant of Ashura, thus possessing one half of Hagoromo's power. So the addition of his cells to the body of an Uchiha or someone possessing the Sharingan would result in those two sides coming together to form Hagoromo's chakra, thus resulting in them being able to use it for longer. Or it could also be the case that this is just an effect of the cells on the user's vitality and power level, which would explain why Obito could use it for longer because he had more Hashirama cells in his body. Now, as I said, Izanagi does have limitations, so one person using it isn't a problem. They could use it for just a few seconds with each eye and it would be GG's after that. The problem is that multiple Uchiha could use the ability, so fights in the past became a battle of who could create the better reality, and Sharingans were getting destroyed left and right, which is also a separate issue that I'm going to address later on. But yeah, the only way to regain sight in that eye is to awaken the Rinnegan as seen with Madara. Though of course this is only possible for the reincarnations of Indra and Ashura, so it's kind of a done deal for everyone else. Now, when it comes to Izanami, this was created to combat this issue by forcing the users of Izanagi to accept reality for what it is. So in essence, Izanami was created to put someone in an infinite and set loop of choices, and it makes you accept the reality that you're in. Now, Izanami is a tad bit different from Izanagi in the sense that it's activated by the shared experience between the caster and the person it is being casted on. For example, let's say we're in a fist fight and I punch you in the stomach. I can then select that moment to remember the physical feeling of me punching you in the stomach, then keep a mental snapshot of that moment as we continue the fight. My goal at this point is to then recreate that moment where I punched you in the stomach with the exact physical sensation. Izanami would then connect those two moments in time, thus creating an infinite loop between the first snapshot and the last one. So from the perspective of the person the jutsu is being casted on, they would continue to relive all the moments, all the events, all the attacks that took place in between those two moments, the snapshots that I created, and they would be fully aware of that fact. This means that the person would feel the pain of losing a limb or being burnt alive over and over again, since all damages taken will be reverted once the loop starts again, while all their memories of those events remains. By the way, you can create multiple snapshots throughout the fight, so even if you created a snapshot and you can't replicate that moment, you can simply try to replicate one of the other screenshots that you took. This was shown in the fight versus Kabuto, where Itachi first created a snapshot when Kabuto ran his sword through his chest. He then created another snapshot when Kabuto sliced him in half, as indicated by the focus on his eyes, as was also the case when he took the first snapshot, which was the one that ended up completing the loop. So while this loop takes place in the mind of the victim, in reality their body stands frozen in place and at the mercy of the caster. Now this genjutsu, as it is more of a genjutsu than Izanagi, is overpowered in the sense that there's only one way out, which is that one has to accept reality for what it is. So as a counter for Izanagi, it was created to stop the Uchiha clansmen from taking the easy way out and avoiding any outcome they deemed inconvenient. And one simply can't pretend to come to the realization, they have to truly believe it. And that is when you can be allowed to regain consciousness. So Kabuto needed to accept that he isn't Orochimaru and stop trying to become him. And the random Uchiha, Uchiha number 617, shown in the backstory, needed to accept the outcomes of his actions. Two different uses with minute differences, but at a base level they hope to achieve the same thing, which is that person accepting reality for what it is. Also, the illusion of the caster in the mind of the person trapped in Izanami is sentient. It doesn't just repeat the same actions that took place in between the two moments. It also serves as a guide to the person who needs help breaking from the loop. All of this of course comes at the cost of the caster's eyes, similar to Izanagi. So in a sense, as it relates to why Izanami was initially created, you are sacrificing one eye to prevent someone else from losing one of theirs. So equal trade, I guess. Now, me personally, I wouldn't do that, and it also seems a bit far-fetched and, counterintuitive. I mean, the reason why Izanami was created is because the Uchiha were spamming Izanagi en masse. So how many virtuous individuals really sacrifice their own eye to stop a random clan member? And based on how the ability is depicted, you only get one use before you go blind. So you really had Uchiha clan members out here destroying their own dojutsu to stop someone from destroying their dojutsu. And this is even crazier when you realize that Izanagi can only be used twice for a few seconds. So realistically speaking, you just need to let them do it and take themselves out. Which was always funny because you had this random guy, which I mentioned before, the Uchiha, who said he was going to take over the world because he could use Izanagi. To this day I don't understand how he would accomplish this because he can only stop himself from dying for a few seconds twice before going blind. So unless he was planning on becoming the first Danzo by taking the eyes off the other Uchiha clan members, and even if that was the case, he would still be limited to just 2 uses at any given moment. So this plan just seemed a bit far-fetched. By the way, there is another way to use Izanagi, which is by employing a time delay. This was shown when Madara pre-programmed his right eye to activate Izanagi to bring him back to life days after he died in a battle versus Hashirama. So this really means that any Uchiha can safeguard their life by pre-programming Izanagi to activate in the event that they die, which would of course be useful if someone blew them up, or sliced off their head before they knew what was happening. This then brings me to the moment that Sasuke lost his Rinnegan. Many believe that he could have saved his Rinnegan by using Izanagi, and this of course is very understandable. The issue here is that Izanagi needs to be activated before the damage is taken. That is why Danzo wasn't able to use Izanagi with Shishui's eye to save himself after Sasuke pierced his heart with his Chidori spear. As pointed out by Obito, Danzo was simply too late, as he didn't expect Sasuke to kill his own teammate to get to him. This of course implies that Danzo needed to activate it before he was damaged, and the same would apply to Sasuke. By the way, just to clarify, when Izanagi is activated, the eye remains the same. It is only after the jutsu expires that the eye loses its light and turns grey. So even in the backstory where it showed the Uchiha spamming Izanagi, all of them had it activated before they were damaged. That is also why the first guy that used Izanagi died even though he had one eye left that he could have used to revive himself. He simply didn't expect the other guy to also use Izanagi as well, so he didn't activate it in his second eye. So the only way Sasuke could have saved his Rinnegan is if he was fast enough to activate Izanagi before the kunai stabbed his eye, which of course is a different argument. Now as for the Uchiha clan massacre, many have argued that some of the Uchiha could have survived the massacre, of course, using Izanagi, whether it's by activating it before getting damaged or by having it pre-installed. And this of course is a reasonable belief to have, since even though the jutsu is forbidden, many characters use forbidden jutsus all the time without consequence. Also, given the fact that they were going up against the very same village the very next day, it would make sense why some of them would have used the ability with a time delay for its activation upon their untimely death, similar to Madara and Danzo. Now one reason you could grant is that every single member of the Uchiha clan were honorable beings that would simply choose not to save their own life out of principle of not using Izanagi, which we know isn't true since Madara and Obito both used the ability. So I think a more logical reason why that didn't happen is that most of them likely didn't know about it. It was a forbidden jutsu after all, so it is possible that the events of the past were kept secret and the knowledge of the jutsu was forgotten over time. Though based on the fact that the ninjas shown in the backstory had on hidden leaf headbands, it couldn't have been that long ago. But maybe that was a mistake on the animation studio's part. With that said, I do think Obito not activating Izanagi when he went to sacrifice himself for Naruto by intercepting Kaguya's Ashbone was a tad bit silly. He had the time to do it and he knew that he was going to die, so him not doing it was simply because he didn't want to. You could of course say that it worked out fine since he was able to come back and pass his power on to Kakashi temporarily, but there's no way Obito knew beforehand that he was going to be able to do that. And look, if Obito was simply tired of living, that's fine. At least die in a way where he can actually pass the actual Sharingans on to Kakashi so he can keep them. I don't know, I think Obito of all people should be aware of Izanagi since, he used it already, and it makes more sense to stay alive, when the fate of the world hangs in the balance and you have no idea what happens after death. But hey, when a man wants to die, a man wants to die. Now, when I said the ability was somewhat convoluted, I was referring to the fact that the anime made it seem as if the user can affect other people with Izanagi. As I mentioned earlier, the guy in the past was able to revive multiple ninja with a single usage of Izanagi, which means that it doesn't just work on the body of the user. And I know some people are going to say that this is filler, but it isn't. This episode is canon. In fact, it's the very same episode where Itachi explains Izanami, which is a part of the manga. Now, I will say that this can make sense, but it has limitations that hasn't been made clear. By this I mean that Izanagi isn't creation of all things, it's a variant that isn't as powerful. The same way I think that creation of all things is a variant of omnipotence. So someone using Izanagi doesn't have reality warping powers in the sense that they can create whatever they want, or let's say make a reality in which their opponent is no longer alive. I think, and this is headcanon of course, that Izanagi works similar to Izanami, in the sense that Izanagi also takes a snapshot of what reality is at any given moment, which then allows one to reset things to how they were before any given event. So when Danzo, let's say, activates Izanagi, it takes a snapshot of the current Danzo, and then when he gets damaged or destroyed, he's able to replace his current body with the snapshot that was taken before. So in the case of the random Uchiha reviving the fallen ninjas, he was able to do that since he took a snapshot of his comrades in their current position before the ground collapsed. That then allowed him to reset their current state back to the state they were in before, which is why they all appeared in the exact same position they were in before falling. So it might seem like a distinction without a difference to some extent, but Izanagi isn't rewriting reality to whatever the user wants it to be based on their imagination. That's creation of all things. Izanagi just allows one to reset reality to a state that it was before, and this applies to not just the user, but also the people around him, if the user chooses to. That is why Izanagi isn't as broken as people say it should be. It isn't creation of all things, it's just a variant. With that said, that is it for the video. If you guys liked it, drop a like down below. If you guys want to see more videos like this one, let me know in the comments as well, and suggest those videos, and maybe I'll make them. But yeah, if you guys liked it, drop a like, and if you are new, subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.